What's up, everyone? Welcome to the broadcast. If you're watching, hopefully you like the vibe music. I am going to get us started. If you're watching, this is your first time, make sure you like the broadcast and subscribe to the channel. So that way I can tell that people actually like what I'm putting out. If you have any questions, as always, drop them in the chat and I'll come in here and I'll look at the chat every so often. So that way I can make sure I get everyone's questions answered. And then as always, we're going to kind of go through the markets. We'll go through stocks and crypto and kind of where I think everything's at. And then if I don't losing my voice, we'll go through market sentiment and ultimately what I think we can expect for the next coming week. So hopefully you're all excited. But the first thing I like to start off with is I like to come over to crypto land and take a look at the fear and greed index. This kind of tells us whether or not we're bullish or bearish, and we can kind of maintain a month over month sort of viewpoint on the market sentiment. So not too long ago, we were over here in the green, and because we've been crypto's been sideways for a while and stocks have started producing downside action, we're starting to move towards neutral from more of the greed index. So that's something to pay attention to. When we do look at the stock market to start, we're looking at NASDAQ. We had a nice little peak here, like this 15,786. And then what I've noticed in the 4 hour, which I think is the important time frame to pay attention to, is we've been pretty bullish, obviously, for a while. And as we maintain this bull run, what we've done is we've maintained above this 20 EMA, this red line. So every time we've kind of come up to it, we've fallen through, we've come back up and sort of use that as like a sustained line. But now at this point, what we're starting to see is they're getting pretty tired, the indexes, and they're starting to correct because of it. So we've had this before here too. So we drive, we fall through everything. Takes, let's see, this February 15th till about March. So a little less than a month of correction. Then we had a little relief rally, then downside action. So sort of like what we're expecting over here now, or what we're actually going through. We've got this downside action that you could say started somewhere around here, like July 31st, as we come into the August season, which is typically not super good for the market. But with NASDAQ in general, we've had a significant downtrend. And so we've fallen through our bullish trend lines, and we're all the way kind of here on the last zone of support. Even when you look at like the RSI, when we have these bullish drives, we maintain above this 50. Even if we do go below, we kind of pop right back above it. So fall below, pop right back. But now what we've done is we're kind of like coiling up and we're pushing straight down. So this has been a really good opportunity for shorts, especially as soon as we lost this 50 line. So for me, it kind of tells me on the 4 hour that we're still in a pretty nice downtrend. Same thing on the daily. We look over here. One of the things to pay attention to is we had this nice bullish drive. So we come up, we touch the 50, come back up, touch, come back up. Every time we kind of maintain above it. And you'll notice the awesome oscillator maintains, come down just a little bit, and then we come down. So it doesn't really go much into the bearish. But then all of a sudden we started, like right here on this peak, we started to get we built a divergence. So we came back down, we pushed here, and it didn't go any higher. So from here to here was a nice little bearish divergence that started printing. So I kind of started to tell us that the indexes were tired and that there was probably going to be some sort of correction, which was then followed through with. So that's where that, and the big thing with the indexes and with the stock market is they definitely have a correlation with crypto. So when you look at crypto, actually crypto has been really flat lately. So when we look at like Bitcoin, when we come over here, it's just been characterized this year by like a big pump. So coming down here, a big drive, and then just sideways action for February, March. So sideways action, same thing here. Big pump that only took like 3 days, and then straight sideways action, little down channel, and then pump. And now we're doing the same exact thing right here. So it hasn't been characterized by big, long, sustained movements. It's a movement that takes, I mean, look at this pump, we'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like a week of pumping. And then we have Wednesday, June 22nd, all the way over here to August, we've just been moving sideways. And so that's kind of how it's been characterized for me. When I look over here on crypto, if we wanted to maintain its sort of composure, I think we're good up until when we look at here, we finally got the balance when we hit the bottom line right here. So I think that's what we can expect here. We lose the bullish momentum. We start peeling through, kind of trying to wick off somewhere on these EMA bands. And then ultimately we get rejected off all of them, but we hit the final one and that gives us the bounce we need to drive. So ultimately, I think there's two outcomes for crypto right now for just looking at Bitcoin, especially. We need to hold this 29,377 zone-ish, because that's where most of our sort of bullish momentum is sustained right here. If we lose this, we probably push back down and then we sit here in range forever. And then ultimately, I think if that happens, that leads us to coming back to testing this 28,681. And ultimately, I think we get a really good bounce if we can push back down to this 27.2, a bounce like from something like that, because there's going to be a lot of people waiting there for longs. Should push us up to like the 33, 34 range. So that's kind of what it's characterized. Then we push to 34 and then we go sideways for 75 years and then we do it again. So that's kind of what that's been characterized by. When we come back over here and look at the indexes, before I keep going, let me know if there's any questions in the comments. But when we come back and look at the indexes, so I already looked at NASDAQ, SPY, everything tells basically the same story, but same thing here. So on the daily, we have a sort of a divergence on the awesome oscillator, starting to a little divergence on the daily, and ultimately that same thing as NASDAQ. So came back down, tried to play it out, pushed, and then ultimately now we're in this downtrend. So when we look at it week over week, we're in week 2 of the downtrend. And to me, it doesn't really seem like it's done yet. I mean, there's somewhat of a wick here. But when we look at SPY, we've got some support at 442. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see us come back down and test like the 430 zone, because that's really where we're going to test that bullish momentum on the weekly. So looking at previously when we've come down and touched here. So October 10th, 2022, we touched and that kind of initiated this nice little drive here. So I could potentially see us, and this one took from January till October or September-ish. So I could potentially see us coming down to at least the red line. So, and if we wick off the red, then I see us coming back and putting in new all-time highs, because it's not going to get ultra bearish. If we come all the way down, then I think we've got problems. But I think it's a better picture on the daily as well. So when we have these drives, ultimately when we fall through the EMA bands, we start to get bearish. And this is kind of how I can tell, or how I pay attention to what the momentum looks like here too. We lose the 20 EMA, we come down here, and we notice when we're losing that, we tried to bounce off of this 50 on the RSI and got rejected, and now we're below. So I would say we probably, and when you look at today, we're coming in, we're going to come up and we're going to try to test this again. And if that rejects again, then that puts us in bearish mode. We come back down, we test this 441, then we bounce around for a minute. And if we can sustain that, obviously we drive back up. But then if we don't, then I would say our next target is somewhere around like 430, like I was talking about a second ago. When we look at crypto, let's kind of look at some of the currencies that are going on right now. If you have questions, put those in the comments. Let me know what you're wondering or what you need, and I'll answer them. If you have a coin or a pick you want me to look at, let me know on that as well. But let's take a look at some crypto, and then we'll look at some stocks. But big thing for me, it's like this 7 days, it's like 1.17%. So for me, when I saw this drive happen, like this little guy, I got in just about right here. And I wrote it up here and took profits at this zone. And now for me, I just wait, because every time we've had these big runs, we just come right back down. It immediately gets completely rejected. But this one, at least it's sustained for a minute. So we had this drive basically from 28.6 up to 30,200-ish. Then we come back down. Now we're going on 1, 2, 3 days. And I would anticipate what we're doing now is we're trying to hold support off of this EMA 20. So if we can hold support here, then we're going to bounce and drive and come test this zone where there's a lot of kind of junk in there. It's pretty choppy. If we can't, we're obviously going to reject, and we're going to keep coming back down, and we'll go right back down to this chop zone, probably revisit somewhere down here. So big thing for me is I would like to see us close a weekly, ideally above here, but in a perfect world above here, and we have a nice bounce that drives us. So that's what I'd be looking for crypto, for Bitcoin. But basically it's 1% over 7 days. So it's not like it's in the best position possible. What's interesting is the things that are doing really well in crypto right now are like the shit coins and meme coins. So Dogecoin up 2%. We got SHIB is up 20% now. Pepe was up quite a bit not too long ago. So seems like meme coins have been pumping pretty hard. And it seems like gaming coins are starting to push quite a bit as well as I look through the list. So kind of visiting everything here. I think the pick of the week is probably Sheeb. You've got some smaller caps like Unibot that went to the moon. See Pepe's up a little bit. You've got, I was looking at, I have Unibot over here. Unibot that just went nuts. And this is what it's, Unibot's like a coin buying thing, but it went absolutely nuts. Same thing, Rollbit. It's gambling. It's going absolutely nuts. So those seem to be the things that are doing really well right now. The other one that did pretty well was LivePeer. It's kind of a live streaming platform. It seems like it's like accumulation, downside. So straight up, straight down. The other one that I was kind of looking at up here that did pretty well was Illuvium. So gaming coins. So gaming coin, nice pump. Seems to be what's the flavor of the week right now. It's gaming coins and it's shit coins and meme coins. Even Ape is starting to show a little tiny bit of strength. Okay, so when we look at the stocks, though, some things that I'm kind of, what's up, Dion? What's up, Green Ranger? Welcome to the broadcast. Let me know if you guys have coins you want me to look at or anything like that, and I'll be happy to take care of you. But big thing that I'm looking for Bitcoin for like a bounce is what I would like to see is us continue to hold this line. So notice how we came up and then we wicked on this, like the supply zone. There's quite a bit of fluff in there. So then we've lost it, fell straight through, wicked off, and then kind of got punched right down by it again. And now we're just moving sideways. But one interesting thing is, and I put this in the dude server on Bitcoin, what I think would be ideal is we continue holding this support line. So this is the line that I told the group that I was going to long off of if we were able to sustain and hold, and we did. So I saw this candle, it kind of broke the cycle. So we had this sideways, we went sideways, this broke the cycle, and then I longed right here and then pushed. I think I took profits on my long somewhere around here. But so as soon as that happened, I pushed in because we broke that line that I told everyone in the dude server that I thought was going to be a really important line to break. That's going to give us the sustained strength to get through. So point of confluence 1 was right here. There's 29,188. Point of confluence 2 was breaking this one, and we held it on this 4-hour candle, so it became a pretty decent entry. And then as we come back down, it's like we've wicked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, and it's been sucked up every single time. So if we can maintain this and we can stay above this, it's pretty junky and choppy right here. But if we can wick off this, this is a beautiful long zone for me because it has a lot of confluence. Obviously, it has a lot of strength. When we look at the weekly on this zone, we've got a bunch of good support spots right here that we've kind of utilized now and in the past. So I think if we can sustain that, that puts us in a really good position for a further uptrend. So you can see we have this nice push here and then the drive and then completely shut back down. Tried to shut it all the way back down like this one, but it didn't work and it pushed all the way back up above here. So for me, I'm comfortable 29,266. I'm comfortable sitting in a long right here if I need to be in order to hopefully ride that push out. It could be, let's see how the week, if we can close above this on the weekly, that would be ideal because it might give us the push that we need on a Sunday night to drive through. And the other interesting correlation that might be happening is as stocks start turning down, sometimes crypto will do the opposite. So that's something to pay attention to. But for me, it's like I'll put a stop loss right here and I may put in a long here. And then if we can sustain and push, then it looks good. But what I would like to see is us being able to hold. So we've got this 3-day right here that I think obviously pushed, but if we can hold just above that, that would give me a good point of confluence there. If we could do that on the weekly, it puts us in a good spot because the weekly we're pushing just above, and then next week we would want to see this push a little bit higher and have a nice drive. So that's what I'm looking at for BTC. Some of the coins that I think did really well this week were Sol. Sol is killing it. If you look at the weekly, kind of came down in the downtrend. We fell below the 50 in the RSI. And then now With SOL, what we've been able to do is we pushed all the way down, we found a little bottom, and then we crossed that 50 on the RSI, came back and retested it and pushed back up. So this could be a nice little drive and momentum for SOL to come into as long as Bitcoin behaves. So for me, and it's just that EMA 20. So it's like 2191 was a perfect zone to wick off of and long off of. And then we push, or let's go to a 4-hour chart. Or it's like, what happened? Where did we ultimately have a mass? Well, notice here, we tried, we got shut down. And then as soon as we actually, and notice we tested the 50, tested, rejected. And then here we actually pushed, and that's what gave us the God candles that started showing up. And now we're pushing sideways. So what we could anticipate with SOL probably is right now, it hasn't retested. We could anticipate a retest and then a push. See what happens there. Illuvium was another good one. I talked about that one a second ago. I actually jumped into Illuvium before this. So what happened was I noticed that we were right here. We got rejected. And then all of a sudden we were able to push through, and then I started paying attention to it. And so for me, then it was come back down, and we retested, bounced, retested again and pushed. So to me, Illuvium looks really good just because of that. We were able to retest and bounce and drive. When we look at the 3-day, we're crossing over. Awesome oscillator starting to show little positive signs. So it tells me that it's probably a pretty good market to be in. What's up, dudes? Everyone's here now. Hopefully y'all are doing amazing, just chilling and learning. That's right, I'm doing great. Let me know if you guys want me to look at anything specifically, and I'm happy to look at that stuff for you too. Just drop it out. Let's see what else we've got here. I think another one that was a good performer this week that I really liked. Let's find it. Gosh, LPT went nuts. I think it's too far gone now. I mean, I would anticipate if this peels over, then we've got a sort of bearish divergence. So we can expect it to come back down and retest. And if it retests off that reset, that's going to be a really good entry. The other one that's doing really well is SHIB. And Rollbit. Rollbit went absolutely nuts. So same thing here. Rollbit's couldn't clear this 50, couldn't clear it. As soon as it cleared it, and it actually held, it went nuts. It went straight up, and then we came down, it retested, and then it pushed straight up again. And now we got a little divergence coming out. So I think this is going to play out and probably retest that 50 again and see where it goes. The other one was Unibot, just absolutely monster. These shit coins are going nuts. So it touched and then pushed. So stuff to pay attention to. I think ARB, if Bitcoin can behave, ARB might be in the early stages of what could be a pretty good long. So I'm looking at right now, as we come through, big thing to pay attention to is, are we going to cross and actually push, or are we going to reject off this 50? So we actually pushed here, which was great. Now we'd want to come through, maybe retest and push to get a little bit higher. And then I think that puts us in a really good zone for ARB to be long. Maybe I don't even have SHIB on here. But she was a good one this week. Meme coins, it's meme season. So we tested, came back up here. We tested out that 50, pushed. Now we're driving again. So, I mean, SHIB looks good. It looks like it's already cleared this. So I don't see a lot getting in the way of SHIB in this drive. So it's another one, just another thing you have to pay attention to. Sometimes these meme coins are just the ones that are absolute monsters. I think for us next week, what we should focus on for crypto or Bitcoin is, this is my long zone. So 29,359. If we lose this, the next spot to fill would be right here. But for me, I'm kind of paying attention to this. I'd like to see us close a weekly above, and then I'll have a lot more confidence to be able to come in here and push along, unless we turbo pump somehow this weekend. But for me, I'd like to see that before I start jumping in and doing anything. For me, it's like you plan for this, and then you wait and see where this settles out. So that way you can plan for another one and not get completely and totally wrecked in the market. So that's what I'm paying attention to. This line, ETH, same thing. It's got a similar structure. So ETH, we pushed through on this 1842-ish line. And then we pushed down, we wicked pretty close off of it, came all the way down, wicked. So we've kind of touched one, two, three, 4 times. So if that can be a zone of support, then that would be a good long zone for ETH. So that's kind of what I'm paying attention to there. And then if we do that, then our profit zones end up being like 1851, 1859, and then it pushes us up into like the 1870s and 80s zone after that. I think for Bitcoin, if we're able to push off of this, then first big point of resistance is going to be 29.7 until about 29.8. And then after that, our next big point is like 30,200 and then 30,600 and then 31,291 is kind of the zones that I'd be looking at for that. When I look at stocks that I'm paying attention to right now, things that have done really well or that I think are obviously Apple, Google, a lot of these big caps, quote unquote, are in a sort of starting to begin their downtrend or in a sort of downtrend. Apple for sure is seeing it. Google, not so bad. Still kind of sticking on this trend line. If it comes down and loses that, then it'll plummet. Microsoft looking pretty weak at the moment. Meta starting to fall apart. They're all losing these tight, nice little trend lines that they had. Amazon starting to look red. So overall, the market as a whole doesn't necessarily look great. NVIDIA looks like it's going to come straight back down to 374. Tesla almost there, 232 is what we can probably expect out of that if it can't come back through and wick here. I thought PayPal looked good, but after earnings, PayPal plummeted. So that's a rejection off of the weekly on the 50. That's a pretty significant rejection. So I would anticipate PayPal comes back down in the 55 zone. BABA, it looks decent. I don't think it looks terrible yet. I had calls on BABA. I sold them when the market started looking pretty bearish. But ultimately for me, I think BABA's not bad. If we can wick and sustain here, then that pushes us up and ends up being a nice move. So if we look on the daily, this needs to hold. If we lose that 50, then we're probably going to dump. The other things that I was kind of looking at were Disney. I wanted to see, kind of waiting for Disney to clear this trend line. And then I think it'd be a nice move. It's been in this downtrend forever. So it should be a pretty significant impulse. Unfortunately, it got close and it got rejected straight back down. So the last one that I've been really watching is MPC. I started paying attention to this one down here, like 120, Marathon Petroleum. So every time it touches this line, it just turbo wicks. And finally here, turbo pumps straight up. And so now we're starting to get the parabolic zone. I think this hits like 150 minimum. And then it's something to pay attention. I mean, for me, it's like you want to buy on the red candles. So for me, it was like, okay, buy zone, kind of a buy zone, and then never again. So that one's been absolutely killer. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for the market. Let me know if there's any questions. Do you have a coin that really stands out at the moment that would be possible alpha? When I look on the crypto list, that's kind of what I do is I just start looking on the 4 hour and we start going through and seeing what's going to cross that 50 line. So once we start seeing something like this, like DOT doesn't look great, but it is getting close to testing that 50. Now, if it gets rejected, it's going to just plummet and see new lows. But if it can clear that, then it looks pretty good. Sol, I think, is on a pretty good run. This is, with all this being said, Illuvium, I talked about this a minute ago, but I think Illuvium's just absolutely crushing. Notice how it stayed above that 50 line, and now it's pushing pretty hard. And we're seeing the awesome oscillator drive too. So Illuvium looks great. I think optimism's cooling down. I'd like to see that. Mana is something to watch. The AO looks a little nasty. Nothing really significant that I like here, but what scares me on Mana is it's tested the 50, lost it, tested, lost it. Now it's about to test it again. So if this pushes, then this thing will go from 30 cents to, it'll start pushing near the 40 cent zone. So that might be something to pay attention to. If it can get past that on the 4 hour, I think that would be a pretty significant drive for Mana. Litecoin looks like it's starting to move to that zone, but it's also it doesn't know what it wants to do. It looks a little bearish at the same time. So AVAX looks terrible. Atom, no. Phantom, not bad. Decent market. Phantom has been able to it's sort of wicking here. If it can drive, it gives us sustained momentum to move. If we look at the daily, we're starting to get pretty close. So, I mean, Phantom could be a good play. One thing I would watch on the daily is Phantom being able to cross this 50 and notice how it is starting to get impulsive. So if it can clear this EMA 20 right here at 24 cents, 24.34, and it clears the 50 here and retests and doesn't die, then I think Phantom's got the capabilities to push to like 26, 29 cents, maybe even 30. Let's see, Axes doesn't really know what it wants to do. Comp, no. Aave, no. SNX, getting close. Kind of starting to peel over. Not quite yet, though. Maker could be doing something. Maker's starting to peel over. So if that can bounce off the 50, then I think Maker goes on another run. Uni actually had a decent bounce here. So nice bounce. If this can sustain and not collapse, could be something. Daily kind of concerns me because we're coming off of a pretty big dump. So something to pay attention to. LDO, no. Tron doesn't look bad. Notice how it's gotten rejected off this 50 every time. So if Tron can actually push and not get rejected, then that's going to be a pretty significant impulse too. Let's see. If you want me to look at anything, these ones, they're kind of starting to get, Cello Gold could be something. Notice how it's starting to build this impulse. It's clearing that 50 on the daily. It did clear the 50 on the daily. So it kind of got stuck for a while and now it's pushing. So what we could see is a retest and then a drive, or it could straight drive, obviously, but that could be something to watch, pay attention to as well. It's starting to look like it wants to be a bit impulsive. And the other thing right now is you just got to watch the memes. Seems like the memes are the ticket to paradise. Yeah, I mean, I think if you wanted to buy into, it's a good point. I think if you wanted to buy into Illuvium, the time to buy into it, let me find it. Yeah, I mean, it is on a pretty big, I hate buying in on these giant candles. I think the time to buy in for this one would have probably been between like right here when it started crossing. So it would have been between 43 and like 48-ish. That would have been a good buy zone because that's when it really pushed. We got rejected, retested, and then it pushed again because that's going to give us the strength to start pushing on the weekly levels. So, I mean, it looks pretty good. I mean, if it depends on your time horizon. Obviously, if Bitcoin turbo dumps, then it's going to turbo dump. But when I look at this, yeah, for me, I kind of want to catch these when they start to clear that 50, even the week after. So like I said, between this 46 to like 48 zone would have been ideal because that's when it's first crossing. And then you get that big impulse move that we got right here. So yeah, you could definitely argue that it might be a little late when you look at the weekly, which typically takes a long time to play out. We haven't even crossed yet. So if the weekly crosses and pushes, then that puts us in a pretty good zone for Illuvium to start moving towards like 90. And then maybe I would say 67, 90, 117, and then like 125 before our first really big resistance point. Big thing for me, if I buy something, is I always pay attention to what my stop points are. So if I get into something like Illuvium and I'm kind of Bitcoin is being shifty and the market's whatever, and you're buying in on like 8 green candles, it probably isn't the best idea. But if I buy into something, I'm like, okay, here is my thesis. My thesis is that it's going to come through, bounce and drive. Okay, it did. Cool. Now, if I bought in somewhere, let's say I bought in right here, then I have to say, okay, well, where's the next significant support zone that I need it to hold or I get out? So For me, I would look on the weekly and say, okay, this is what I need to support my thesis. If I breaks this, then my thesis is broken and it doesn't make sense anymore. Then I start looking over here and I'm like, okay, probably in this, I would say if we start getting under this, let's look on the 3-day. Maybe the 1-day. I need more price action. So yeah, for me, then it's like, okay, well, 47 is a pretty good support zone. If we can hold above that, we're probably in a good zone. For me, my final point of no return would be like 44. And then I'd probably just get out of the trade because then at the point it's dying. Same thing with like Pepe. I think Pepe's primed. So it's starting to push up on the daily. When we look at the 4-hour, it cleared and now it's kind of consolidating. When I look at Pepe, we were able to drive through and then we wicked off right here. And now we're kind of trying to push past this zone. When I look at the daily, it's coming up on testing this 50. So if it drives through and pushes, then Pepe probably pushes to up here somewhere. But same thing for Pepe. If I was going to buy into this, then I'd say, okay, well, what can I find here to support my thesis? Let's say I bought in like right here. Then I would say, okay, what's the point of no return? When do I call this like just a lost trade? Right here. So that would be my zone of support to where I'd say start considering getting out of the trade because now we've completely lost the trend and we're probably going to see more bottom. When I look at something like Pepe, it's basically, this is just a crude line, but it's basically following this line and then it breaks out, erases all of the previous price action and then does this. It's doing the same thing like right here. So it's pushing past this line. Oops. And then if it holds and sustains like it did last time, then it gives us a nice push. So then Pepe starts pushing towards its up here in this zone and we start getting pretty good price action on it. So something to pay attention to and kind of something to note. Yeah, if the weekly crosses, then I think we've got pretty significant price action and movement we'll see out of it. Obviously, we need Bitcoin to behave. When you look at the weekly, I like the 3-day a lot too. But you see the 3-day crossed, right? This was technically the cross. And then right here, usually after the cross, when there's a confirmation, it goes into like this God candle. So that's where we're at now. I'd say off the 3-day, we'll probably come back down and test this like 50 zone, see if we can hold this as support. Obviously, we haven't tested any of the supports. We've just blown through them. Actually, let's look on the daily. Like right here, we pushed through, we tested the support, drove. So next zone is like 59. Yeah, and then when we look at the weekly, if we're able to hold support above this 50 zone-ish, and this pushes on the weekly, which next week being like this, closes in 2 days, if it maintains, we're probably going to be on the 50. And then the following week, we'll see if it clears. So it's going to take 2 weeks. And obviously, the weeklies take a lot longer to play out because it's a whole week of price action. But if a weekly crosses, I mean, if Illuvium is a fairly new coin, but so we can't really, we can go back here. We can't get a ton of good price action off the weekly, but we can look at something like the 3-day and say, okay, maybe the daily. When it does start crossing these zones, remember, we're pretty early in the market too. Like here, it was basically came out and turbo pumped all bull market and then bounced off the 50 and then was good. So this will be kind of fresh price action for Illuvium because it's a newer coin. It was introduced back here, September 2021. So yeah, I think if something crosses on the weekly, you've got pretty significant confluence. You just don't want to jump into it until after it crosses because then you could get wrecked if it rejects. So that's just something to pay attention to. It's going to feel like you're getting in late, but if it has that confirmation, then it gives us confirmation for a sustained drive. Yeah, and then other things to look out for that I was kind of looking at are like I said, I got some Pepe, or I was paying attention to Pepe, but we're starting to push. So to be ultimately safe on these kinds of trades, quote unquote safe, obviously none of this is financial advice, but to be safe, this daily in the next couple of days will come over and we'll attempt to cross. If the daily crosses, that means it's probably going to cross this red line, which is the EMA 20. If it does and it pushes and sustains, then it drives. So then it'll come up to the 50, it'll bounce and drive. If it gets rejected, it'll just push down off of that. So that'll be something to pay attention to. And look at back here. in a similar point of where it happened. So we're coming off the bottom, we're wicking, and then we pushed. So notice how the cross happened here, right here. And then the actual sustained price action happened here on the confirmation. So it's like push, we hit it, and then we confirm the next daily candle and turbo pump. So that's kind of where we're at with Pepe right now. I think we're waiting for that confirmation. So we need this candle to wick off, which is what we're doing. We're really close to it, hitting that resistance line a bunch of times. And then what'll happen is it'll essentially go boop and push straight up, because this candle will confirm it. If it confirms, remember, it could always reject and catastrophically collapse. That's something to pay attention to. You can see where Sheeb kind of did it. So Sheeb's coming up. We started to get a little more bullish, and then we got super bullish, but we got rejected, bounced, and then we finally pushed, came back and retested it 75 times, and then basically finally pushed. So something to pay attention to on those guys. Cool. Well, that's pretty much it. That's all I've got to say. Overall, in a nutshell, I think if Bitcoin can hold above the lines I talked about in the beginning of the video, then I think we're in a pretty good zone. Like I said, it needs to hold above this. Oops. This like 29,347 zone. That's been a pretty important zone for me. ETH needs to be above this 18,444 zone. I'd like to see us close a weekly above that. Stocks, we're in a corrective pattern, so I don't see stocks coming out yet. I think we'll probably come back up and test this red line before we do anything. It's come so far off of it. I think it needs to reset. So probably looking at that, which means a little bit more price action, 430s for SPY, 350s for QQQ, and then ultimately everything across the board kind of follows it as it goes. Uranium was a pretty good call, but Marathon Petroleum, like I was talking about, was a great one. I think it's a little late now. We're starting to get these God candles, which tell me that it's starting to push a little too much. Notice how we had this big high here, and then we haven't been able to clear anything else. These are divergences. So we did have it play out here, but I think there's probably a bigger one at play coming up. So that'll be something to pay attention to. So that's it. That's all I've got to say. Happy to help. Make sure if you like this broadcast, like the channel and subscribe to it. And then let me know inside the Dude server if you're there, if this was a good broadcast, and then share it on Twitter if you really liked it, and make sure you follow me over there. All right. I'll talk